Now Britons have held a rally in London demanding action to speed up the process of leaving the European Union.
But we are here to remind our elected representatives that the country voted to leave. Get on with it.
Because I feel that my democratic rights are being trampled on by the minority of people who did not vote for Brexit. The minority of people voted to stay in Europe.
The MPs are our public servants. They work for us. They were elected by the people to serve the people, and they need to realise and respect the wishes of the people, and we want our Brexit.
And demonstrators, many draped in British flags, as you can see, gathered outside Parliament to urge lawmakers to invoke Article 50, which will formally start the Brexit negotiations. And many in the crowd said that they're disillusioned and betrayed by the process thus far. More than 17 million British citizens voted to quit the 28-nation bloc in a landmark referendum held back in late June. Prime Minister Theresa May has said that she'll start the two-year process to leave the EU in late March. But the issue remains heated in the UK after a high court ruled that the government did not have the authority to trigger Article 50 on its own without parliamentary approval. And in December, the Supreme Court will hear the government's challenge to that ruling. Now we're joined by Mr. Ian Williams out of New York, economic expert. Hello, Mr. Williams, and welcome to Press TV's Top 5, sir. Now, we're seeing impatience a little bit here by the Leave camp. Is it perhaps protesters are concerned that lawmakers will find a way to renege on triggering Article 50?
Well, that might well be the case, but I think actually far fewer demonstrators turned out than the organisers expected. I think if the referendum were to be reheld, there might well be reconsideration, because it's very easy to call for Brexit, but I think all of those people would be horrified if the government suddenly cut off all economic relations with the European Union. If they suddenly said, we're not going to deal with any of the European Union treaties, we're not going to honour them, the economic catastrophe, the chaos will be so much. I mean, the point is that Britain is part of Europe economically, it is part of Europe geographically, and you can't just sort of suddenly draw a line and say no, unless you want an iron curtain where the English Channel is now. You can't tow Britain off and park it next to Australia or Canada, where Britain is next to Europe, and that's an economic and political fact. It's not something you can sever just right off. Like chopping off people's heads, you can't put them back on again.
So you're saying that a cliff edge Brexit would be insane for the British economy?
It would. A real lemming-like run over the edge would be even worse for the British economy than everything that's already happened. I mean, the economic consequences just from the uncertainty and the reaction are fairly dire already. And it's perfectly legitimate. It's one of the reasons why we have parliamentary systems, is that people can deliberate over the issues and consider options and look at the various possible causes. One of the reasons why dictators like referendums is that they are binary. It's yes or no, in or out. Well, there's lots of other stages in between, like partially in and partially out, or to what extent do we want to be in? If the questions you can't ask in a referendum, would you like to get relief on certain issues that are obviously important to you?
Okay, so hence, since the High Court ruling, that's exactly about what you're just saying. It's to where you're alluding to now. Should the Supreme Court decide to allow Parliament to have a say in the matter, what do you expect we may see? A long, drawn-out, soft Brexit?
I do believe, I mean, on what passes for the British Constitution, Parliament is sovereign. The government can't take an act of this, unwriting treaties and rewriting the law books of Britain, which have incorporated all of those European Union laws and treaties, without consulting Parliament, without Parliament agreeing to it. So that Parliament is the real source of authority in Britain, unless you count the Queen, of course. But the Queen in Parliament is what they call it. But Parliament is the supreme body, and the referendum can give directions, and to some extent it can instruct. But then, if if you tell a driver to drive over the edge of the cliff and he demurs at the last moment when he sees the cliff edge approaching, you can hardly blame him. And this is going to be something that Parliament is going to do. If the Supreme Court validates the position that Parliament has to decide and debate and work on the terms of Brexit, it's not just a matter for a Prime Minister who's never been elected, by the way. Remember, she did not run as Prime Minister. She was elected by a few MPs from within a stricken split Conservative Party. And remember, the majority for Brexit was actually about the same size as the majority in percentage terms for Hillary Clinton, who lost the election anyway. So, you know, deciding everything on a few hundred people in an electorate of 65 million is not, it's not completely synonymous with democracy. There's a caveat there.
Thank you, sir. We're running short on time. That was Mr. Ian Williams joining us, economic expert out of New York.